Welcome back to Miniature Game Montage and a painting guide to how I paint Necromunda Delaque gang members. A quick note that I'm an average painter at best, but that's also the point. These painting guides are aimed at the average Joe painter. My intent is to help you get your minis to a decent tabletop standard, just don't expect to win any awards. I also may paint things differently than the box, just remember it's a guide and you can make it your own. For this Delaque ganger, I started with a black undercoat and a quick burst of gray primer from the top. In theory, if some of the primer shows through when you're doing thin coats, it should be lighter on the top, therefore looking as if light is hitting the model. I start with a German gray, although the box calls for a dryad bark, which I believe is a darker brown. I wanted my Delaque gangers to be in a black kind of trench coat. So I went with German gray because it's not a complete black and it's a little easier to highlight up from. And this color is going on the coat, on the back, the chest, on the arms, all over where the model would have a black or a dark color. And we're then going to highlight that up with a German field gray. This is also a Vallejo paint. And we're going to do a dry brush technique where we're going to load up the paint on our brush and get most of that paint off on a paper towel. And then we're going to drag that across the model and attempt to get the raised areas, leaving that dark black undercoat in the recesses, and focus on bringing this color to the top of the model. And with that complete, I'm going to move to a lighter dry brush with an even lighter gray color. This time I'm going with a Vallejo green gray. It is one of my lighter gray paints. And I'm going to do something very similar, although it's going to be a much lighter dry brush. So I'm going to load some paint up, and I'm going to get that mostly off on a paper towel, much more so than I did the previous one. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going across the model, trying to catch the high points and the folds of the cloak, and across the chest and the back, really just trying to pick out those high spots and those high details on the model to bring light to those. I'm then going to switch gears to a gold metallic type of color. You could use a bronze or a copper or a gold. I use a Vallejo bronze on this step, and I'm just going to go through and pick out the outside of the cloak, which looks to me like it is a copper or a gold type of color. It could also be a very light brown, but I'm just going to highlight the outside of that, bringing some color to it, and then I'm going to work my way around the model, doing the belt buckle and some of the details on the arms and some other places with this bronze color. And with that step complete, I did reference the box for this to get the belt and the clasps that are going up the coat, as well as some area around the face and that respirator area. And next I'll be working on the reds, and I'm using a Mephiston Red from Citadel. You could use a corn red or a Vallejo red. Whatever kind of dark red that you have would be applicable here. I'm going to be focusing on the gun casing as well as on the jacket down below the waist. There's some red lines that go below the hip, and then there's some red lines on the shoulders as well as a few red lines on the back, but those appear to be pretty random. But I'm going to fill those in and we'll move on to the next step. And here's a look at those reds complete. I did need to use 2 thin coats of red to get good even coverage. And with that done, we are going to go back to the Vallejo range, and I'm going to be using gunmetal, and I'm going to be focusing on some of the weapons, going over the knives, as well as the pistols that he's holding. There's a tube that is coming down from the respirator in the front. Several things that will be silver. I'm going to go ahead and do those now. And with the silver bits complete, I think I should have done the skin tones here, but in this particular example, I'm going to go ahead and give this model a wash, and for the wash, I'm going with a Nuln Oil, a nice black wash. I'm going to use this straight out of the pot and just kind of put it all over the whole model, really let it pool in the recesses And then we're going to go to highlighting this model. Again, I think I should have done the skin tones first, but in this particular example, I had something in mind. I don't think it necessarily messed up the way the model looked, but for this one, this is what we did. So moving on to the wash. And with the wash dried, we're going to go ahead and do the skin tones now. I'm going back to a Vallejo game color. This is a wolf gray, and I'm going to be applying this to the head as well as the hands, the only things on this model that are skin tone color. And these guys have a very light, pale type of skin tone, so this color should do pretty well. And while that paint on the skin dries, I'm going to go back to highlighting some things with the Vallejo green gray. And I really want to bring some contrast to the straps and a lot of the what would be leather areas on the cloak. There are some things that I really do want to stand out. So I'm going to go through and give those straps some highlights just to kind of make them a little more pronounced. And then I'm going to go around the cloak as well, where that Nuln Oil kind of knocked those colors back and blended them together. I'm going to give those high points a little bit of this, almost using a stippling kind of motion, very quick and very brief, to give those a little bit of contrast. Now for the skin, I used a Reikland Fleshshade, and I probably should have, again, painted the skin and just did the entire model with Nuln Oil. But I did see a tutorial where someone had used the Reikland Fleshshade on this particular color, and it turned out pretty well. So I wanted to try it out to see how it went. I'm not totally disenchanted with it. I think it came out okay after I go back and highlight it back up. But in hindsight, probably should have used Nuln Oil. I'll have to just try that out on another model and see. That's what's fun about this. And with that being done, I'm going to go back and highlight some silver now, and I'm going to use a dry brush. So again, loading that up onto my brush, getting the majority of the paint off, really working it into the bristles, and then just going over the metallic areas to make the high points stand out a little bit more and be a little more pronounced, almost as if the light is hitting them. So I'm working on the guns, being careful not to spill this over onto the other colors. If I do, it's okay. I can just easily tidy it up. But working on the guns, working on the knives, and the chest, the tube there that's going up to the respirator, also hitting that as well, trying to be very careful. I'm then going to move to highlight the reds, and this is just a much lighter red than I'd used previously by Vallejo. I believe this is Vermillion. And just going to highlight the gun casings using an edge highlight. I'm going to get a reticle that's on his eye that is red, as well as put a little bit into the jacket down below the waist where I'd put that Mephiston Red earlier. Then going to move back to that Vallejo Wolf Gray and start to highlight the face back up, as well as the fingers, the knuckles, trying to make those areas stand out a little more from where the wash really knocked those colors back. I'm going to leave the wash in the recesses as much as I can and try to bring those more pronounced highlights of the face and the fingers back out. Now I also use this color to put a dot in the eyes to show some type of reflection, as one eye has that red color and the other one has this black color to it. So I went ahead and did that as well. And then we're going to move to highlighting the metallics, the golder metallics, and I'm going back to a bronze. It is the color that I used, and I'm just going to hit some of the high areas to bring those back out where the wash had, again, knocked those colors back and faded them in a little. And with that done, you can stick him to the base and give him a matte varnish to protect the paint job. But a very quick, easy, effective paint scheme. I had this guy painted up, including drying times, in about 40 to 45 minutes, so I would have an entire gang done in an evening or two. A very quick, easy, and effective way to paint your Delaque gang members. You're certainly not going to win any awards with this painting job, but it at least gets your miniatures up to a decent tabletop standard that you can be proud of. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.